In progress.
Thank you. So I'll convene our meeting of the Burlington Planning Commission for Thursday, February 16th, 2023. Welcome to everybody who's here. Welcome to our city councilors who are here as well. This was originally scheduled for 2 days ago on February 14th, so we rescheduled it. I hope everybody had a nice Valentine's Day. Our first item on the agenda is the agenda. Are there any changes to it?
No.
All right, seeing none, we will have our agenda as presented. Our second item is the public forum. This is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to us on pretty much any item you would like. We do have a hearing coming up on the inclusionary zoning. If you want to speak to that, if you could hold off and speak during that item, that would be great. And if you don't have time and you want to speak now, you could also speak now during the public forum, and we'll just include that in the public hearing part. Charles, is there anyone who wants to speak during the public forum?
We do. We have Sharon Busher. She is the one and only in the queue so far.
Okay, great. Welcome, Sharon.
Thank you. I'm sort of conflicted. My comments are applicable to the public hearing, but they also are a little broader. So do you want me to wait? Because I can.
No, Sharon, if you want, go ahead now. You have the floor, and we'll just include your comments in the public hearing as well.
Okay. So I went back and read the minutes because I am going to be a little bit redundant because I still feel the issues are ones that I still have with the draft that's being presented. So this is for the amendment, the inclusionary zoning amendment. And I understand the rationale. And that's where I'm going to get broader when I talk about that. But I still feel that the threshold that allows the exception is too low. I understand that if you go, it's 15.5%. If indeed there's a your inclusionary zoning units are greater than 15%, but 15.5 is what's in the amended language. You can deviate from the existing requirements and you fall into the new category, the new amendment. I still feel like that's too low a threshold to allow flexibility. So I want to speak to that. I feel that it should be like 17 or so. And I haven't changed my position on that, knowing full well that this is a burden for developers and that it does impact the market rate units. I'm not naive in that, but I still feel that that this exception, although there's justification for it, I still think we need to be thoughtful about it. The second piece that I wanted to talk about is the FAR, and I was when I read through it, the FAR of inclusionary existing is no less than 90% of market, but once again, that can be deviated from if indeed you have inclusionary units that are it's greater than 15.5% or 15.5% or greater. I'm glad that the square footage is there for the various bedrooms, like the studio 1 bedroom. I feel that people are protected by having that guaranteed amount of living space. So that is important. And I'm glad to see that present. What is disturbing to me is in the background information that's attached to this zoning amendment. When you read through before you get to it, actually, there's discussion about that there may be a need for greater units of greater size that could have four bedrooms or more, and talking about student housing. And although I was on the council and there was the discussion around student housing down at City Place, there was a fair amount of opposition and caution about turning our downtown over to the universities or colleges. I feel like we've already given a lot to them, and I'm very worried about that. And I know that this amendment is sort of predicated on that. That's where this is broader. And I'm glad that I don't know how many counselors are present who will maybe inherit this, but I'm glad they're here listening, because I really think that I don't know what MOU has been signed that was done in executive session, but I really worry about Burlington becoming a bedroom community. I mentioned that in the South End. I worry here. The amount of retail got smaller and smaller and smaller, and there are more and more housing units. Not to say that we don't need housing units, but I feel our diversity and what we offer in Burlington is shrinking. And I'm really concerned. I don't know who's looking at the big picture, but I don't feel like it's being watchdogged very carefully. So my final comment has to do with my current job, which is a little job, not a big one. But it does take me into the community and take me to surrounding communities. And I want to tell you that, you know, some of what is being stated about the number of bedrooms, that there's really no need for more than 1 or 2 bedrooms for affordable units because there's really no families on a waiting list. I have to believe that to be true. But when I'm there, and I want you to understand that I am at a lot of the complexes that are throughout Chittenden County, in Burlington, Winooski, etc., even beyond. There are a fair number of families that have more than 2 children that are living in these units. So I don't understand the disconnect between what we have for there's nobody on a waiting list, and yet the actual people living in these units that demand at least 3 bedrooms, and I'm not sure about 4. So I am concerned about that disconnect. And I feel that sometimes I feel like we are several reports behind when we're making decisions. We're vulnerable like everybody, that, you know, we are dependent on what information we're given. But I'm telling you, there is a disconnect. And so I am concerned about that and how that's addressed. And I just wanted to share that with you all, because I want to be able to provide housing for families. And when I was a counselor, I would walk on Main Street to City Hall, and I would encounter a lot of the homeless people that were on the sidewalk. And some of them had been on wait lists for a while. I believed them telling me the truth. I can only say I believed them. And some of them had children, so they were extended families. So once again, I think, you know, we want to provide housing for the people in need, and I'm not sure that this really meets that spirit completely. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Charles, is there anyone else?
No, Andy, that's it.
Okay, then we'll close the public forum. Item 3 is Chair's report. I don't have anything to report tonight, so we'll move on to item 4, which is what Sharon's just talking about, the proposed CDO amendment ZA-23-02, inclusionary zoning. Who wants to start this one off? And then we'll go, this is for our public hearing, but we'll start off with an introduction to it, then go to the public hearing and come back to the.
Sure, I can give a brief introduction. Recall that at your last meeting you did discuss a few items. This amendment proposes to amend the inclusionary zoning standards by creating an alternative compliance path in the creation of bedroom mix and unit size in inclusionary zoning units. Specifically, it creates a ratio wherein if the gross floor area of the inclusionary units is greater than the percent of inclusionary zoning units required for that project, it can alter the bedroom mix and the unit size. Bedroom mix today is essentially tied 1-to-1 with the market rate units in a project. And unit size is essentially set at least 90% of the size on average of the market rate units. So again, that's last time you all did discuss a few other items, as Sharon Busher mentioned. One of those was whether or not minimum unit sizes should be established in the event that this alternative pathway is proposed, and that has been included in the amendment as you all recommended. And that's essentially it regarding the substantive sort of summary of this. Essentially, this amendment is being proposed to allow greater flexibility in the development of inclusionary zoning units. I would say, one topic that you all did discuss was, why is this necessary, and who's ultimately going to decide sort of what the bedroom mix might be? And in the case of City Place and other sort of large residential projects, there's typically an affordable housing developer who's a partner in the project, and those are the organizations that have their finger on the pulse of the affordable housing market, I would say, and best understand what types of units are in demand. And I should clarify, we should have corrected the memo, but after the beginning of these conversations with you all in the City Council Ordinance Committee, we did learn that there is in fact some demand for larger inclusionary zoning units. But that said, ultimately, again, think it's advisable to allow these affordable housing developers who are part of these larger projects to use their best judgment in allocating bedroom mix. There are, once you all have completed your discussion of this particular amendment, we do have a couple minor revisions that we suggest. They are very minor, almost technical in nature, and I can introduce those now, or be happy to sort of run through the presentation that we gave last time.
Charles, why don't you say what the revisions are that you recommend, that staff recommends? I think that'll be helpful in setting this up for the public hearing as well as for our discussion.
Okay. Okay, so again, there's in the packet that you have line 8 in the amendment. It's at the top, the language that we propose striking. So this is language that is not currently in the ordinance today, but that we had initially proposed, but no longer feel is necessary and ultimately may just cause confusion. And that is removing that line that says, except when the alternative compliance methods are provided as established in those sections. And then, in the table, it's most likely inferred by most people, but adding at least to the header in table 9.1.8-1 just clarifies that IZ units may be provided in excess of the minimum standard.
And both of these are actually related to a question that Emily had asked us at the last meeting about making sure that what this ordinance was not setting up for was a situation where someone maybe provided only a very small number of IZ units that were really large. And as we were reading back through this, the intent of this language that we had suggested was to point to the fact that there were other ways that someone could comply with certain portions of the standards. But we realized after Emily's question and after rereading this, that this could be conflated to mean that someone could provide fewer than 15% IZ units, and that was not the intent of this. So ultimately, we decided that striking that line 8 and making sure that table 9.1.8 clarifies that those percentages are a minimum that can be exceeded was the better way to convey what we had been trying to convey, and just rely on the language about the exemptions themselves then that follow in 9.1.14 to establish that alternative compliance.
Sorry, is that a typo? Is the word pay supposed to read may
Where, yes,
at
probably,
bottom? Clarifies that projects
yes,
May.
Yes.
okay.
good catch, yeah, good.
Good thing that's not the ordinance. language. So that's it, right? Those are
Yep.
the only technical corrections that
That's
we
right.
would offer.
Great. So I think with that, do we have anyone, we'll open up the public hearing. Is there, Charles, do we have anyone who wants to speak during the public hearing? And as I said, we will incorporate Sharon's comments from the public forum into this public hearing, so they will be official public.
Andy,
hearing.
we don't have anybody right now.
Okay. So I'll just leave, we could leave open the public hearing, but come back now to a commission discussion. And, you know, we heard comments again from Sharon. I don't know, Charles or Megan, if there's anything you want to address in the comments she made. I think we talked about them a little bit last time as well.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would just reiterate that Charles had mentioned is that at your last meeting, he did share some updated information based on talking with Michael Monti of CHT, a clarification of some information we had previously received to, you know, we do acknowledge that there is a waiting list for larger units. You know, we were able to learn from Michael Monti about the sort of mix of bedrooms and unit sizes across their entire inventory in Burlington and in other parts of Chittenden County. And so we do understand that they do try to incorporate 3-bedroom units in some of their projects, but they also expressed to us that different projects in different locations within Chittenden County have different needs. And in some cases, like projects in the heart of downtown, they may actually have a greater demand for smaller units, particularly as we think about their mission to try to help provide housing for people previously experiencing homelessness. So the mix of bedrooms may vary from project to project. So there is a demand there. They are trying to meet it across the kind of ways that they're developing in the county. But ultimately, this can still offer some flexibility for them to meet certain kind of site-specific needs as they come up. I think the other piece about this that we haven't really talked about a whole lot before is that kind of within other areas of the ordinance, the units that are identified as inclusionary units can move around. And I think that by offering this greater level of flexibility for what the ultimate mix of unit sizes and bedroom mixes look like in a project, you know, it may be that certain bedrooms and certain units of certain bedroom sizes are occupied as IZ units today, but they could float or move into a different unit mix in the future if those needs change. So I think that's another kind of area where this works in conjunction with existing parts of our ordinance.
It's one of, I would just add, this is Brian Pine from CEDO. One of the hardest things to monitor from an IZ's perspective is when you go to sort of ask for the documentation that the units are both affordable to and at least initially occupied by households at a certain income level. And there is the floating nature of the ordinance. It's pretty challenging because if you had a mix that was based on the formula, the way the ordinance prescribes it, and then there's some floating and mixing of where folks are, you then have to kind of tell them that they have to correct that, and households are in units and they can only afford that unit. So it gets really difficult to hold to this very fast notion of that things stay the same, that unit comparability, bedroom comparability stays exactly the same because needs change. And
I think that was maybe one of the main points from Sharon's comments that I thought was worth addressing. I know hear and understand that she has expressed her disagreement about kind of what the threshold is for where you become eligible for this alternative compliance method. And I don't know if
I can
you have
answer
any.
that. I mean, my response, I do hear that concern. We set it that low because it's really the exception that anyone goes above the minimum required amount. So as soon as they do, it by definition includes a nonprofit affordable housing provider. And so that's a way of doing that without singling out a specific type of ownership, so.
And I do think the other piece of setting it at 15.5% was intentional to ensure that at least that amount of space is being set aside. Whereas today, if someone were bringing a project online that was purely complying with our ordinance, because the units only have to be, the IZ units only have to be 90% of the size of the market rate units, it's possible that today a project may have less than 15% of the gross floor area dedicated to these units, but still comply. So in some ways, this is pushing for a little bit more of the building area to be dedicated to those units.
Great, thank you. So to the commission, any questions, comments, concerns?
I think Sharon also addressed the amount of retail space.
Yeah, so I mean, I think I'm not sure if Sharon's comments about retail were kind of bigger picture about what's happening downtown in general. You know, the IZ amendment itself doesn't have much of an impact on what we're thinking or what is ultimately happening with the creation of new commercial space in downtown or anywhere in Burlington. But you know, we do know, and this has been a big part of our discussion too about the South End, separate amendment that's moving along for the council's consideration. You know, we're hearing that there are a lot of concerns about the demand for creating more commercial space. And it's something that we've been trying to work through in the context of that zoning amendment. As the policy is currently set up, we're trying to require that some, even if just a small portion of new buildings, is dedicated to non-residential uses. But we're trying not to ask for too much more than what commercial brokers can actually fill, or ultimately what the market needs. I think we've seen Charles in particular, having moved here from Raleigh, has had a lot of experience in other communities recently with just having, you know, lots of excess retail space that can't be filled for a variety of reasons. And so we're trying to be careful about finding that balance between wanting that as part of mixed use neighborhoods in Burlington without demanding too much. So that I think will be something that this commission talked extensively about at one of their recent meetings, and will be something that we'll talk about with you and other members of the ordinance committee about the South End zoning.
I would just note that the issue of balance of retail or non-residential in our core downtown is very much, you know, sort of something we're thinking about a lot right now and talking about in city government, because the loss of 110,000 square feet of office potentially, if the state of Vermont does sell 108 Cherry Street, there's no guarantee that that remains office or commercial. We're trying to work with them to find a solution to that, to preserve those jobs in our downtown. And it's a major challenge to the fact that retail has shifted even way before the pandemic. That shift had begun. And now with the pandemic resulting in so much remote work, the demand for, there's a real lack of demand for office space, and there will be for the foreseeable future. So this is a challenge for every city that, you know, just about every city is dealing with this.
Thank you. Julia, I think I saw your hand go up before.
Yeah, I just want to say I agree with those changes, and I think, you know, that the technical changes that you mentioned earlier, and I think that's important to just make sure that they're aligning with, you know, our intent of, you know, not creating a couple large affordable units, but trying to encourage that parity. The other thing I wanted to mention is just in response to Sharon's comments about the waiting list and what she's seeing on the ground. I do think the proposed changes are designed to be adaptable to those changing circumstances. And I think, what Brian just said about the difficulty in administering those floating standards right now also underscores that. So I just wanted to say, I feel like these standards encourage that adaptability as there's different demand for different configurations of units going forward.
Yeah, thanks for that point, Julia. I think that also touches on a good point as well that we've talked about in some of our previous meetings. And you'll remember that in maybe the very first version of this that you saw, we were actually trying to add language that addressed both the allowance for units that had fewer bedrooms as well as for units that might have more bedrooms. In the case where maybe a market rate project is only providing 1 bedrooms, but we want, or someone wants to provide several larger units. So, I think through our discussion, we determined that the language that we have provides that flexibility on both sides and that we didn't need to be redundant about also allowing larger bedrooms as well, or larger units as well.
Anyone else? Charles, has anyone come in for the public hearing?
Nope, we do not have anybody else. Kim Sturdivant, city attorney, is here, but she's just observing.
Okay. So we have the proposed zoning change. We've had our public hearing. What would the commission like to do? We could take action on it and refer it to the city council. If so, we need a motion for that. That motion would also be to make, assuming we want them, which I believe we do, to do it as amended with the amendments that Charles had recommended and include our report. Is that a motion, Emily?
Yeah, I'd make a motion to, as so moved, a motion to move this to city council for consideration with the amendments and the accompanying report.
Perfect. So we have a motion by Emily, seconded by Julia. Any further discussion?
I'm in agreement.
Okay. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Andy,
Oh,
sorry,
yes.
you do have Ben has his hand raised.
yes, Ben. Before I take the final vote, did you have a comment or question?
Well, not on the underlying matter. It's more of a procedural matter because these are our first sort of joint ordinance planning commission meetings since my joining the council. And I'm curious, Andy, perhaps question for you, perhaps question for staff or for Kim, whether or not there is any separate action that those of us from the ordinance committee are supposed to take on our own account with this now moving back to the council, or is it simply that, do we join in the vote here, I suppose is the question, or is there a separate matter that we need to take here?
So, Kim or Megan, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think there's no separate action for you to take, and that you don't participate in this vote. Your participation here was both so we could hear, any issues or concerns that the ordinance committee might have, and you could hear from our perspective. And so when it goes to you, to the council and to you, that you're more up to speed, further along, and able to jump in and move it along, at the speed you want to, but you have more options to move it along quicker if you so desire.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that in past meetings, that was something that previous ordinance committees had decided that they were not necessarily going to take action as part of these meetings. We could ask Kim Sturdivant if you would like to take any action, if there is the possibility that you can. But I would agree with Andy, and I think if either of the counselors that are here, if you have any other questions or thoughts that you would like to share with the commission before they move this on formally to you, we are anticipating that if this moves out of the planning commission tonight, that this will be on your agenda on Tuesday night for consideration.
And so just
if, I'm not sure if there's a question for me, but I agree with what Andy and Megan have said so far. It's Kim Sturdivant, acting city attorney here. But because of the way that the statute sets the passage of the zoning amendments, it is a vote coming out of the planning commission to send it to the city council. So it's not really a vote for the ordinance committee.
Thanks, Kim.
It's really a great deal for city councilors. You get twice the meetings, but none of the action.
What gives?
Thank you for being here, council.
Yeah, no, thank you for all
So-
the information. That's helpful.
So we're halfway through our vote. We voted all those in favor, but I never asked any opposed. So any opposed? No. So that vote passed unanimously. Thank you. And again, to the ordinance committee members, thank you for being here, both at this one and our prior meeting. I think it is really helpful, at times to have these kinds of joint meetings for all of us. So thanks again. So we'll close that item, move on to item 5, which is commissioner items. When is our next meeting, Charles or Megan? It's
Next meeting is Tuesday, the 28th of February.
good. Anyone else with any other commissioner items? All right, then Megan, we're on to you for the director's report.
Okay, I can be pretty quick here on the director's report. Just want to give the commission a heads up that at your next meeting, I will not be here. So Charles and Sarah will help take care of everything that we have planned for the agenda for that meeting. I think that we are going to be bringing an amendment to you that the council's that the planning commission's ordinance committee has previously discussed and should be a pretty straightforward amendment for your consideration and hopefully warning for a public hearing. So that is our plan to round out this month. We previously shared that we're looking ahead to a couple of bigger items for your meetings in March, including we're holding some space for a presentation of the Joint Institutional Parking Management Plan by CATMA and the Hill Institution. So I know that's always an item of a lot of interest and discussion. So just want to give you a heads up that we're expecting that next month. As far as other amendments that the Planning Commission has worked on in recent meetings, wanted to share that we have kind of a big night coming up with the City Council next week. They will be hearing about the Trinity campus amendment that you all had talked about and sent a memo for. We anticipate presenting that to them and asking for their referral to their ordinance committee to discuss that amendment. We're also anticipating referring this item on that you discussed tonight for their consideration of warning for a public hearing. And at their meeting, you see, was it last 2 weeks ago, I think, Charles and I also presented the South End Innovation District amendment to them, along with your memo of recommendations on that one. So we are looking forward to scheduling a time with the counselors that are here tonight to take that up and talk about it in more detail. So all the big items that you've spent about the last year working on are all in front of the council now. So it's a big milestone.
Megan, when is that big night happening?
Tuesday, the 21st.
Cool.
Next week.
On Tuesday. Oh, because
Yeah,
President's
because
Day.
Monday is President's Day,
Yeah,
so the meeting
makes
is on Tuesday. Yeah.
Okay. Good. All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah,
Oh, anything else? Okay.
for me.
Then we're on to item 7, which is minutes and communications. Is there a motion to approve the minutes and accept the communications? Motion by Julia, seconded by Alex. Any discussion on that?
The minutes
Seeing-
are really, really good. Like they're just so good. So great job.
Great job, Sarah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank
Good.
you.
Thanks for noticing that, Julia. So all those in
Hard to
favor
keep
of
track of everybody.
it is. All those in favor of the motion, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have our minutes and communications. Item 8 is adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn? Motion
I'd
by
like-
Alex, seconded by Julia. All those in favor of adjournment, say aye, raise your hand.
Aye.
We stand adjourned. See you in a couple weeks. Take care.
Thank you for running a tight
Thanks,
meeting.
everyone.